Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Liu. I'm the director of CCAA. Welcome the CCAA Chinese Contemporary Art Award Critics Award talk, Room for Independent Critic. CCAA Chinese Contemporary Art Award was established in 1997 by Dr. Sigg. Since then, it has become the most important academic contemporary art award with a long-standing history in China, about 15 years. 10 years after establishing the CCAA in the year 2007, we founded a new award, the Art Critics Award. It became the first and the most significant critics award in China. The vibrant Chinese contemporary art scene lacks sufficient independent art criticism. At present, the market is the main arbiter of what is considered good or bad works. The weight of its judgment, based primarily on commercial criteria, stems from a shortage of alternative resources. China currently has neither enough museums willing and able to participate in the discourse through stable curatorial practice, nor enough self-directed critics determined to educate the rapidly growing audience that is willing to experience and in some cases invest in progressive visual art. The Art Critic Award addresses this issue by identifying key examples of independent art criticism, which is so essential to the advancement of art creation and appreciation. And by granting the winning art critic financial support for an in-depth research project that might otherwise be difficult to fund. This year, 2013, we held the 4th Critics Award and will publish the 2011 Critics Winners book. We will also organize a series of forums and talks related to Chinese contemporary art. We are happy to be given the opportunity to share our research of Chinese contemporary art and its criticism with the public, which will hopefully nurture an academic, objective perspective on Chinese contemporary art. Now, I would be very honored to introduce today's speaker on the stage. This is Dr. Sigg. He's the moderator today. Dr. Sigg is the most important Chinese contemporary art collector and researcher, and the main donator of M+ Museum Hong Kong. And he's also a member of Tate Modern, MoMA New York, and M+ Hong Kong in the future. And next to him is Ms. Gong Yan. She's the editor-in-chief of the Art World magazine, deputy director of the Museum Power Station of Art Shanghai, and she was also a CCAA Critics Award jury member in the year 2011. And this is next speaker is Mr. Huang Zhuan. He's a professor at the Guangzhou Academy of Fine Art. And he's also the executive director of OCAT Shenzhen, and also the director of OCAT Institution Beijing. He was a jury member of CCAA in 2012. The fourth speaker is Ms. Aimee, editorial director of ArtReview Beijing and Shanghai. Now I will leave the stage to Dr. Sigg and other speakers. Let's welcome the talk Room for Independent Art Critic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think we are. Dear guests, I'm very happy we have this cluster of editors-in-chief here who really know their trade. And we have a very seasoned professor who is in the midst of this for long already. So I would like to start and hear your opinion on a, well, maybe general issue. Is there independent art criticism in China? If there isn't, one may come to this conclusion. Why isn't there? And I suggest to start with Professor Huang.
I think today's discussion time may be a little bit short, and there's enough time for us to elaborate the answer. So what I'm going to do is to give you some idea about Chinese critiques, and I think it was started from the 1980s. After 30 years of development, I think the content, the nature, and of this critics has been changed greatly. In the 1980s, we think that the critics is a way of art creation. So they are one thing. So it's associated with art, but in the 1990s it became more complicated, which was influenced by the Western culture and art. So now, at that time, we had some professional critics merged, but still have some rely on some other factors, such as the arts and some rules, etc. And now we have some independent artists. And is there any room for the development of critics in China? I think we need a lot of fundamental work so as to promote this critique in China, such as media. I think now in China, there are only few medias are engaged, or few institutes are engaged in this work. I think the independent art critic should attract more attention by the public. So, how to develop an independent art critic, and how to carry out an independent art critique, that's the questions we need to really think about. And I think so that's the 3 stages the Chinese art critique had gone through over the past 30 years. So now, I think now we have our Art Critic Award. It's a very positive movement. It can promote the development of art critique in China.
Can we turn now left? We have 2 persons who are in the midst of creating media. And I would maybe extend my question a little bit by pointing out that there is a difference between art journalism and art critique, and art journalism reporting about what happens, what takes place, while art critique analyzing in depth what all these things are about, that art journalism may report more on the surface. And it would be interesting to have your view on both these issues. Would you want to start? Yeah.
First, thank you for Uli and Anna to inviting me for this conference. And excuse me for my English, and I will change to Chinese now.
And I think that first of all, we can briefly review Chinese history in art critique. Starting from the 1980s, it is for the purpose of propaganda of art, and so there were some positioned for the art critique. But after 2000, we have new movements and developments, and that is that our magazine was closed, and then the internet media started to develop robustly. I think maybe this is one of the good development. I think our topic today is quite big and very serious. And in China's art sector, I think we need to thank some social medias or some other internet giants such as Weibo, Xinnan, etc. And recently, there was robust development in art market, and they will have some new movements and developments. So the importance of art critics have evoked a lot of attention from different sectors. So we have a new rewards related to art critic. So some new generation of artists have seen some hope. So I think maybe there are some issues we can still consider. For instance, there's a philosopher in France. He came to China and became a big phenomenon in China. During the communication with him, we can see there is no environment for communication. I just use his book or his view to demonstrate that or to prove that my view is correct. So there were some concerns I'm worried about during the art critique. For instance, lack of the material to analyze the artwork, and so also we lack of some tools to analyze the art to make art critique. So these issues will have become some hurdles for us in the way of development of art critique. And moreover, due to the background of Chinese art critique, many art critics come from universities, and there were no related courses in universities. The only related courses maybe is the basic theory of art. So when people make art critique, it's just based on their normal knowledge and some impression of art. There is no systematic support or theoretical support for their art critique. So they need to learn by themselves to absorb more knowledge so as to have a better art critique. They will learn books from books, and they don't have practical experience in art critique, and sometimes may bring some problems. So when some ordinary people, when they read their art critique wrote by them, maybe it's very difficult for them to understand the content because it will be too academic. All the ideas will draw from the books directly, so it's very hard for the readers to digest. And
so anyway, the lots of critics look it up to related to how to write about it. But actually, for my personal thinking, is you have to go through a deep thought. You have to judge with lots of object by theory. At the same time, if you have those such experience, the how to look at it, the way to how to enjoy it, then the critique from the art, it will become a paralyzed. And then you will become a third, the object, the topics to discuss about it. And then other things maybe is for a creator, maybe it's because it's all depending on the college and for media to survive. So for the media, their survive is very solid and depending to the production, which is a product. It's a support. Let's say about a gallery. Let's say if it's lots of the institution or the gallerist to creator or to the critic, how are they gonna be equal? How are they gonna be looked at it? How are they gonna be judged it? I think for those questions, I think the different way how do you look at it, and then you become a critic, and then
here talking with you. And basically, I agree with what Mr. Huang 老师 just said about this very 我要不换中文吧 Sorry.
Let me change to Chinese. At least I actually agree with her what she say. Is an independent critic is need a little some space. It's actually become a very pessimistic. But then after that, it's you don't need to be actually depressed or worried. I think a critic sometimes are from negative and become a positive. That's the process you're learning. And then actually it's for the artists, the changing, time is rapidly growing. So it's a lots of a changing in the between. It's a lots of things it's not existed. So let's say it's a creator. We're not actually real to the judge, how to critic the things to subject. Maybe because we just look at it at their position. We don't actually consider what is actually critic to what object's about. So in China, not just we'll talk about in China, it's in globally, and there's artists. They have a critics that or the looks and judgmental things that came from everywhere. It came from all different directions. So let's talk about a newspaper. They all focus on the independent critic. And they look at the condition and all extra. But it's some critics came from the one particular newspaper. But what I think is that's very depressed. Because you're looking at what you look like it, you don't see what the story is really main focus behind. But if this is a critic will work, will do something, some organic type of the topic, to look at a way to in the working process, maybe what we wait to look at it in the critic, maybe we have a clear message or clear theory because we don't have such experiences of how to critic in a certain thing. So let me talk about. So let's say the example. Critic is the original. Like we critic since from the 18th century. For them facing is the art itself is not an artist. For them, and then they were talking about the modern theory. So 1880s, that when he said a conclusion about art, he said, so for we facing today is about not just all the artists that was in the hanging at the exhibition. Well, not about capitalism, not about the things. It's about the backgrounds. And then things of what we've done accomplished is right and wrong. It's just like we're talking about a quality or a quantity. So it's not the real things. We're the critic the face. We have to face the art itself, and not just the critic about the comparison with artist to artist or whatsoever. And it's judgmental too. That last year, when I was in the CCAA critic work, that what is the standard behind, and this time, what is the standard we can be focusing to? When the 18th century, when the Salon, or 20th century, like 50 years ago, when we said what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is not good, what is up to standard, what is not up to standard, they must have a certain type of a definition of a standard. And it was hard to crucially to critic about it, because we need to set up the standard in order to move forward, because you must have a formula about what's the standard's definition behind. That's why, are you comparing with the comparison with the traditional art, or when you comparison with something else? And it's kind of a group critic, or individual critic, or independent critic. So now I think it's a critics. I'm not sure it's good or bad. I think it's become a more group-wise, which is active in the media life. That's why it's replaced by lots of artists instead of critiquing to the artists or what the artist, the exhibition, what their product. or the painting. So I think because rapidly growing this world right now is we got lots of affected by internet, to network, the digital lives, and so, and the Facebook, whatever. So when we're going that direction, then I think a real means about it behind the art, it will be disappear in the critic world.
Let me maybe put the question that arises in this context. You touch upon education for art critics, and I take it we start from an assumption that there is a toolbox for art criticism. And this toolbox for art criticism may actually apply in a Chinese context, in a Western context, in an African context. This is a hypothesis. And what do you think? We understand there is now extremely limited ability to study art critique. Only 1 or 2 courses touch upon it. Is there such a toolbox that is valid for art criticism everywhere? I tend to think so, because it's like gravity. It also applies to China, and it applies to the USA, and it applies to Europe. But there may be a dissenting opinion, I hope. What are you thinking about this issue?
I think that this coding is one of a professional job. You must be trained by professional. But this is can done by technology way. But then it's also a creative job. So I think that this is the most of a combination. And then for one person to only critique and the focus on the one thing for the society related or the background whatsoever. For the relationship, all those what happened. And then you can actually putting in a word to the writing to let the message out. You know, I'm not quite sure, because when I think it's a critic, it's very serious issues and for the professionalism today. So I never done any culture professional in the coding that way. That costs trained lots of they quite be trained a monster. So that must be the patterns about how to educating those critic people in the first place. So for knowing that learning critic to how to educating them, how to input their fundamental of a theory, become a critic, it must be. It's not just from the education. It also came from the experience and the relationship and the communication, and with the artists, knowing their background. I think that's very important. So you spend time and for a way you detail to look at things in a different way. So in this series, I think for the professional to build to this, you must be execute to join this group of people, the cultural or the critic people. And then it's for look at the short term, for attending some workshops or attending some more experienced people and listen to them, and then share the input. And then, but most important thing is, for the base, you need to have a holding the consistency of the base, that how to look at the art in that point, and then to the critics.
Maybe another issue, unless somebody want to interrupt me now on this education thing, but another issue, please.
I think one school, if can they educating one author become one professional author or the creator? I just hope I want to have a simple knowledge and don't be doubt and those knowledge you have and to go for it and to be creative. So if you have a community to be together with those creators together, exchange information, and then, so that would be much help. Let's think about the creator right now, or so because the relationship is very close by, the relationship is very, not just uptight, so because they all have a professional job together, you have artists, you have to keep the distance. So I think the knowing them is very important. So lots of a creator, not just that they look at it, the critic from the outside, they have to input their self in the personality to understand the critic, the artist or art, and they become a one of a parallel, the one pattern. So being a critic is just like the artist too. You have to be creative in order to create something.
You touch upon this issue of intimacy between artist, critic, curator in China, which is worldwide, but very much more intense in China. And it creates one kind of dependence, not independence, which is maybe a major problem in the Chinese context. In the past, we had what I would consider some political dependence with the art critique and the art magazines. Certain vocabulary was prescribed, a certain vocabulary was banned, and there had to be ideological content, and sometimes there was room for the artwork itself, sometimes there wasn't even room. Then that sort of subsided, and then came a kind of economic dependence from the market, rather. The critics are now very busy writing for artists' books, and an artist doesn't do one book now a year, an artist does do 3 books a year, and they write for the galleries, and that creates that kind of proximity which anyhow is in the Chinese society, and it's very difficult to deal with for a critic and may impact the result. Maybe you can tell us something about this particular issue.
I think now is an independent critic. It's almost from outsider. Me, myself, for this stage right now, we can say that we're independent, but then we're also work as a group. Because we want to be an independent, very professional, good critic. Because we have to stand our own position to put the standard, and then become how to be a professional creator and to keep the distance. So my mentality is like if you're in a society, there are lots of affected by different area. It's not just a commercialized or from anywhere, from market or economy, what's the matter. Now you can see the lots of exhibitions from everywhere, from big or small, or from overseas for mainland, whatever. So for us, for critic, we just focus and where we're at the right time in the right place. So when we're critiquing something about it, and we also consider all their backgrounds, consider their society, consider their all the elements inside. So we try to critique and the way based on the way we look at it at the art, not from the commercial side of view, or not from the society side of view, not from the political side of view. So if we're talking about in different other way, like we're talking about Chinese critic, but if we're talking about lots of overseas global, like a German way, maybe the critic came from different way because our backgrounds are different. maybe where education traditional ways are different. So there's no such a right and wrong. Say your critic is wrong because that's where you come from, or my critic is wrong because that's how we backgrounds we educated. So that's all the factors was created by the society. So lots of critics were done by actually from the face-to-face, lots by talk, discussion by discussion. It's not by forced. So as a critic, for me, I mentioned very beginning, the Chinese art critic is passed through the 3 different stages. So let's say if we're going to do the one exhibition art that being a critic, then it becomes soon is creating lots of exhibition that the new element. That's why we cannot predict. So it's in the even you're standing in the media point of view to critique one thing, they bring out lots of impact of the certain some of the artists and art, the exhibition, artwork. So the process I can experience myself is they all want to have become an independent critic. But then, are they reflect the big or change a certain molten thing? For critic point of view, it's a professionalism. And then also how they're gonna be stand the media and then making a right move. Because they might be an outsider. So that's why I have to look at it that point of view. What I mean saying is there's no point how to judgmental and then make a one critic unless you keep the distance with the media, and we would not try to change things. We're trying to look at a different way to how to promote or try to communicate. So lots of artists. So we have lots of artists. Last year we'll talk about it. If we're not gonna involve with them, then how can we be a good critic people? As I mentioned before, critic is also a creative job.
I think the audience would be very interested to hear something from your daily practices. And let me start with a question. Do they still exist, these banned vocabularies? What are the restrictions you have to deal with in your daily routine as an editor-in-chief? Shall we start from you? There's nobody beyond you.
Actually, I've been thinking of one issue today from my own experience as an editor. What I have done is not the real meaning as traditional magazine. Our magazine is a new type of magazine. First of all, you need to face to more audience or readers, not only face to professionals.
This is very recent practice of my editorial work. 其次是现在杂志
Now, the magazines, they want to survive in the current market. It has to change itself and adapt to the new environment that most people upset. So during the process, undoubtedly, that art value and standard will only make you become an old-fashioned magazine. So if you do one kind of this magazine, maybe you will receive a lot of critics from the others. But I think after continuous effort, your achievement will be recognized by the others eventually. And so I think I have realized something from my work that Now the art critic has many factors involved. In all the medias, maybe we don't need pure art or pure art critique. But if I consider art critique as a method or as a work, and it can be upsetted by different types of readers. For instance, if you want to portray a person or write some art critique, you can give your own idea in it, and I believe that it will not become a very superficial report or articles. I think, of course, if you want to write art critique, they will have a higher standard for the writers or the authors. According to the definition of art critique, the target or the object should be the art itself. But in fact, you can see there are many changes in the art society or art world. So it's the definition of art is different from the previous days. So we can see many new things are happening. For instance, why we are here today, that's because there are some new change here that we need to discuss about. So we need to find some. When we write the art critique, we need to use objective point of view and look at this art piece itself, and so as to create some new types of writing or add new art elements into our art critique writing. So I think all these are very important for us, and all the changes are very inspiring for our art critics.
And could you just briefly answer to my other part of the question? Is there still a vocabulary that you feel a critic should not use or is not allowed to use?
So I have a literature background, so critique for me has a very defined definition.
It seems we must be short. Gong, do you want to tell us about the daily routines and my side question?
Okay, I think media is a very exciting thing for me. And I think we need to have an active attitude towards media. We should use it as a platform, it can bring us a lot of possibilities. So that's why I feel so excited about media. So now we have internet. So now media become an option. You can just display this media simply to the others. So when we look at media, we pay more attention to its content. So now I'm doing a magazine. It has 30 years of history, and it is developed with the development of Chinese art. And I think now we should tend to more focus on the relative factors. So we need to do more research and study more. And I think media is also associated with commercial. So I think in media, you can combine your creation and commercial purpose combined together. And I don't think they are controversial or contradictive. And we also need to consider how to adapt ourselves to the new environment and the new changes. I think that the changes are very challenging, and I think the media, we should adopt various methods to do our work from different angles, such as social point of view, etc. So it's also, I think media is a kind of creation as well.
Okay, so there is room for 1, 2, 3 questions. Should you have any? Can I invite somebody to ask? We have a question over here and one over there. Okay.
But we talk about, the critic's position in the art world, but, one feeds off the other. Critics need to be supported, and magazines often do not have the budget, and this is a really big issue. And the journalists are taking over. They're not doing criticism, they're doing reporting. So do you see that happening a lot, and is there a response, a solution, a comment on that?
Who would want to respond to the eternal problem of art journalism?
I think I just want to ask one question. Media, we don't have big budget to support the journalists to have an in-depth art critic on some particular arts. Maybe that would be a long issue for us. So I think without the budget, it's impossible for art critic to survive. So as an editor, I must write it, but as an author, maybe as a critic, I can choose not to write it. So I think we have been making a lot of effort to try to solve this problem. And later on, for instance, I'm a media person. I have very good articles or reports, but I don't have any financial support from the others. But maybe I use my own platform or channels to publish my articles, and then after it is published, I can organize more talks, and so maybe I can find someone to support me financially, but I have to make sure that I'm still an independent art critic. So who give me the lowest money, then I will do the critic for them. So this has demonstrated that, for instance, if a magazine give me $1,000 to write a critique, and then I won't accept it. I think this would not be true. But you are the exception. But is that possible for me that as we have 3 parties, readers, writers, and editors, we are associated together, and we can provide some kind of financial support, but at the same time, we need to ensure the independence of the art critic. For me, I think that's impossible. We can think in that way. Many people are willing to write their comments on the internet and for free, and they don't receive any money from anybody, but they're still willing to write their comment on the internet. Why they are doing that? I think for art critic, they have their own statistics. Of course, we have many blogs and comments on the internet, but internet has made. Maybe I'm a traditional person. I think the art critic on the internet will damage or hamper the development of art critic. because you cannot ensure the quality of all this art critique on the internet. Everybody can write art critique on the internet and release to the others. And for someone who write art critique on the internet, they can change their names or and change and hide their identity. So I don't think they can ensure the quality of the art critique they wrote. So I don't trust the art critique on the internet. I'm not very familiar with art critique. So I don't think the internet art critique is a good method. So I have some study on internet.
Sorry, I think this issue is an issue far beyond art critique, which we cannot resolve here because it's valid for any domain of reporting. But maybe we give this last question to the lady over there.
My German is much better than my English, so I choose speak Chinese.
I would like to ask a question about Professor Huang. I'm a linguist. Now I live in San Francisco, and I have been living in Switzerland for 20 years. I know many friends from art sector, and now I live in Silicon Valley, and I know many friends in the U.S. and many of them are very interested in art. And many of my friends, they very like my art blog. And I write art blog. It's just my personal interest. Professor Huang said that people like me may have negative impact on art critique. I don't think so because I have 20 years of art. I can speak 4 to 5 languages, and I can have very good dialogue with curators and artists and collectors. So I think my art critique is the first-hand critique, and it's personal critique. And I won't criticize on the others. I just say something good about some artists that some artists. And so I think Professor Huang. So you mean that you are a real art critic? So I hope that you can accept my way of writing art critique as an internet art critic.
We are a very tolerant group, sitting up here, sitting down there, and I think we must conclude our panel. We are very fortunate that so many questions have not been answered, so we will be able to continue in a year from now. Thank you very much.